that's basically the equivalent of changing intensity. So we're going to add a couple more things. I'm going to add this thing that I'm going to scale up again and make it look like some type of machine, almost like what you would see in a wood shop with a bandsaw, or some metal shop. And let's scale it and get it positioned. And the thing I recommend is to just play around with this. I call this sometimes the Star Wars aesthetic, because if you look at all the spaceships and things in Star Wars, you'll notice that it looks like everything works, but if you actually start to break it and look at it, you just notice its weird mechanisms and stuff, and there's really no rhyme and reason to it. It's just we perceive it as being functional. So if you position stuff enough and you kind of put it in a layout that looks familiar, people will start to assume that it's something that they don't understand, and that's how you can kind of create a more realistic environment. And also making sure that you kind of have clutter and enough stuff. So this would be kind of the base level. You could go further and add posters on the wall and grease spots on the floor and those types of things. But the one thing I'm going to do is I'm adding these conduits or pipes, and let me rotate the T-joint and get that in position. And this is a modular system. Once again, you want to do fully load on the packages in order to see this. I'm going to position that on the top and get that set up. And then I'm going to take the conduit and pull the conduit up, rotate it 90 degrees. And the nice thing about the conduit is it has a skinny end and a thick end, so you can actually just get them aligned and shove them in and out, and you get a good amount of flexibility to actually connect them. And I'm going to have to, trying to get this adjusted, I'm going to have to tweak grid snapping a little to get it to go right. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Go down, tweak some grid snapping, see if I get, well, it's a little off, but good enough for demo purposes, especially once we get the lighting. So I'm going to select that piece plus the T and the machine itself, and right click, and I'm going to choose group actors, and now they work as a unit, and move that towards the wall so the conduit kind of starts to emerge from the wall. If you spend more time on this, you can run the conduit across the floor into the other machines, but I'm going to hold down the Alt key and I'm just going to start copying this out. Because it's a group, it saves time trying to individually do everything. So anytime you can use this technique, which you'll see me do later for some other things, it's very helpful. And it'll make your life a lot easier. Let's see if there's any other objects we can get. I'm going to ungroup this just so I can copy off the conduit pipe one more time so I can get it to go into the wall. And actually, to make it just a little easier, I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees so that the flange comes out where the wall is, and I have the skinny part so it doesn't look as funny. I don't want two flanges against each other. And it's slightly off the wall, but it's going to be dark enough in there no one's going to see. So let's see, let's add a couple things. We'll add this control panel. This is another one of these things I'm going to have to scale it up and adjust it. And the one thing you'll notice with this, and we'll notice it once we build the site, and also just the one thing I wanted to note is you don't have to scale everything proportionally. So I made this skinnier so it doesn't come through the other side of the wall and you don't see it. But when we go to look at this item, you'll notice that there's actually these blinking lights. They're on the emissive channel, but the problem with that is they're animated on the emissive channel, so they're not giving off consistent light. So anytime you see something that's animated on the emissive, it's not going to give off light. So there's no point in doing use emissive for lighting off those panels, even though it'd be kind of nice to have it animated. And in Unreal 4, that probably would work. Okay, so we got everything set up. We got our lights, and then you can see slightly that that's blinking. And like I said, that's not going to work as far as actually illuminating the light at all for you. So, but it's a nice effect, and it helps to add some realism and has some stuff that's dynamic and moving. And like I said, there's still that kind of light effect, and I think it's the external light isn't bouncing enough to actually get in the space. So now let's start to work on the outside part, which I'm calling the flight deck up. Let me finish this up. I'm just going to take this tank and use this to just kind of finish up the space and that'll be my last piece of clutter, and I'm going to just pull these off the ceiling. I have no idea what they do. I just thought it would be kind of unusual to put them coming off the ceiling, and I'll just, once I get positioned, hold down the Alt key, and I'll drag off some copies and use that to break up that wall visually, and also give it a slightly different sense of space so it's not as open at eye level. And come in and look, and now we're kind of done. And now we can think about kind of what to do with the deck and the actual outside. So we'll go in and let's pull up some items. The two items I'm going to use is the girder, and the other item I'm going to use is the, it's called the bunker, but it's basically a concrete column. And I'm going to scale the column vertically. And the one thing to be aware of is you don't need a lot of components. And a lot of architecture is repetitive, so once you get one or two elements, see how often you can work with it, and it'll look better than using 1,000 different elements that aren't related. Because usually when people construct stuff, they usually use the same materials over and over. So I got to get the girder in place. And just give me a second to do this and adjust it, and try to get it centered and positioned properly. I also have to make sure it's not going through the ceiling at all, make it a little bit bigger. And once again, this is a pretty small girder, but I've come in and kind of adjusted the beam enough that it looks visually proportionally right. And that's something, if you're not sure what to do, get some reference footage, images, and see if you can use them to make sure that things look right. And I'm going to rotate off a copy and tweak this. And there's actually some rivets right where the beam ends on the texture, so if you get that position a little weird, it might look funny. And you could always put another item around there to kind of block that transition if you wanted to hide it. We're going to tweak those, and we're going to select all of them. We're going to group, and then I'm going to get this, get it grouped. We're going to move it around and get it centered with the doorway in the center. And then let's pull it up towards the doorway. And once I get that in position, I'll hold down the Alt key and pull off a copy. So here we go, there's one copy. Okay. Now we're going to copy this again. Now we get that sign. And now I'm going to ungroup that. Just right click, group, ungroup. You can also open the group, select that one piece and remove it. And now I can border select all those by holding down Control and Alt. Select, hold down the Alt key and drag that copy off, and now I have the second. Now I do have some overlap issues which you would want to go tweak, and you're also going to get a rendering error that says UV overlap. So just to let you know, and you'll get an optical phenomena called Z fighting because you have two items that are exactly on top of each other. Because this is going to be dark, it won't be an issue, but ideally you'd want to go back and clean that out in some way. And I'd probably just run the beams off the edges because you're not going to see it. I'm going to bring in a skeletal mesh. This is basically different than a static mesh because it has bones in it or rigging, so it can be animated, and your vehicles and weapons and characters are all skeletal meshes. So highlight it and bring it in, and I'm just going to copy it and use it like an object. Now just be aware that this you can't enter this or anything. It's just the model. You would have to put in the actual factory that creates the vehicle if you wanted it to work otherwise. And the other thing, we'll just move these around and kind of position them slightly different. So it looks like they've kind of, I don't know, landed in different spots. And we have kind of like a little hangar here that we're coming out into. So maybe this is like a machine shop or something for fixing up these vehicles and getting them ready to fly. Okay, so I'm going to tweak that a little, and let's see, what are we going to do next? We're going to build the whole thing so we can kind of see what we have. And we don't have a problem here, and I'll look at this in a minute, but there's some issues with the shadows on the um, skeletal meshes because the vehicles are designed to be flying. And what they do is they project a shadow down onto the ground, and it's a dynamic shadow. And because the vehicle is behaving differently and we're using it as a static mesh, it's going to get a little mad when we go out to render, and we'll see the error next time we render out. And now I'm just going to finish this off by pulling in like a crate and a barrel and just positioning them. And obviously you could spend a good amount of time adding more stuff in different areas. But usually you just need enough to break it up visually and make it look like someone's actually lived or worked here. And usually even just copying stuff a little bit and then using rotate and scale or offsetting are all ways to help. So like with these barrels, I'm going to copy the one barrel up and move it, and then copy the bottom one again and drag off a copy. And the problem is the orientation and texture is the same on all of them. So what I'm going to do is just grab each one and rotate it slightly different. And now it looks like they're different barrels even though they're the same barrel. Sometimes people do this using trees. They'll use scale to get a similar result. And then here's some futuristic container box something. So I'll tweak that around, make it a little smaller so I can stack one on top of the other. And get that set up. Now we've got that item. And then obviously we can keep on working on this, but we'll kind of move on and build. And here's this error I was telling you about. So what's happening is every instance of a Manto skeletal mesh, Unreal wants to basically, it's telling it that it has this dynamic shadow. So what we need to do is we need to basically do go to and properties. So you highlight the object and the model, and then we want to drill down into skeletal mesh actor and components and go down, and in lighting there's a control for basically cast dynamic shadows, and we want to toggle that off. And now we have to cycle through and do that for each one. So we have to do go to again and properties, go down, toggle it off. The one nice thing is once you select one of them, it's in the same position. You could also go into the content browser and choose the scene tab, and you could control click all of them at the same time and just change it in one fell swoop, as opposed to this technique that I'm using. And then hit the refresh button, and that'll get rid of all of them. So that's a way to tell kind of what you've gotten done and what you haven't gotten done. So looks like we're good to go with that. And obviously the kill Z, and I've already talked about the overlapping UVs with it. So that's something to just kind of keep in mind and not worry about too much, but something if you want to do the font, you would. Okay, so we're done with that. Now we have our hanger, and I'm going to turn off the work light and bring it off so we'll kind of locate it. And the other thing I want to just note is there's a dynamic channel on the light. So if you turn that on, you see how it changes to you. Usually the lights default to that, but sometimes if you bring in skeletal meshes, they won't get illuminated if the dynamic channel is not on, because by default they're moving around. So that's just something to be aware of when you're kind of working. But what we're going to do is we're going to bring in this city block. Once again, another mesh that comes. And let me just maximize this one viewport so you can see it. And we're going to drag off some copies and basically position them around, even though it's the same object, kind of like what we do with the barrels. We'll get one in place in the proper scale, and then we're just going to start copying it off and rotating it to basically build the illusion that there's a city built around this flying deck. So the idea is basically you could take the Mana and fly off the top of this building and go to different areas. So hold down the Alt key, pull out a copy, and then we'll just keep on tweaking this, do a little bit of rotation, get that rotated, and let's bring that down. And you can spend a lot of time tweaking these because you want the overlaps, and depending on what angle you look, you'll get different results visually. So you can spend a lot of time creating these, but generally, if the person's not going to look at it too much, we're going to use some depth of field and fog to kind of hide the horizon. That's a way to kind of get it to go a little further. Now, right now, we're at street level because the basically everything was pulled in at the same level. So I'm going to border select the top of all the buildings and then move